Where the brothers of Joseph show up in Egypt needing some corn, some food. So last week we left off at verse number 52 pretty much, and so we're going to pick up there and finish this chapter. Remember, we covered most of chapter 40 and most of chapter 41. We started at verse number 9 in chapter 40, and this is where the butler and the baker of Pharaoh had their dreams, and they told them to Joseph, and he interpreted it to, and he got it right. The baker got hanged, and the butler got his job back, and a couple of years went past, and then Pharaoh had a dream. He had a dream about the fat cows and the full ears of corn, seven ears on a stalk, and then that was followed by a dream about skinny cows eating up the fat cows and still being skinny, and the scrawny corn eating up the fat corn and still being skinny. And then the butler remembered about Joseph being in prison and telling him what his dream meant. So he mentioned that to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh fetched him out of the prison, and Joseph told Pharaoh about his dream, Pharaoh told Joseph what the dream was, and then Joseph told him what it meant. It was from God. God was telling Pharaoh what he was about to do. And then Joseph kind of took it upon himself to tell Pharaoh what he needed to do about it. And told him how that the 7 years of plenty is when you need to save some back to survive through the 7 years of famine. And the famine is going to be far worse than the plenty was good. And so we need to get that taken care of. And so he said, Joseph told Pharaoh, you need to find a man that can head that up. And Pharaoh said, can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said to Joseph, for as much as God has showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according to thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. So basically in one day, Joseph goes at one end of it from Potiphar's mansion to the prison, and then in another day, he goes from the prison to Pharaoh's palace. And he is second in command of the whole country. And for all intents and purposes, he basically runs the country. And so we looked at and mentioned all the different connections with Christ and the types and pictures and things like that. And we left off after verse number 52 when he had his second child. Pharaoh gave him a Gentile bride, which was, again, a type of Christ. He had two children. The first one was Manasseh. The second one was Ephraim. Manasseh means forgetful, and Ephraim means fruitful. And to be fruitful, you need to be forgetful about things that interfere with you, things that are holding you down, hindrances to you. as in Joseph's case, the way he got treated. You talk about being abused and mistreated and having some baggage that you have to overcome because of your youth and so forth like that. That would be Joseph. His brothers hated him. They lied about him. They sold him and would have killed him, except the other brother talked him out of it. Older brother talked him out of it. And his dad thinks he's dead. And then he gets this job and God blesses him. And then Mrs. Potiphar lies about him. He ends up in prison as an innocent man. And he just had terrible. It's just been terrible, terrible. You just can't imagine. And that would qualify him as a number one first-class victim in today's society, but not in Joseph's thinking. And he just does what he's supposed to do. He's a man of great character, very Christ-like in his character as well. And God blessed him in spite of what people thought, in spite of how people treated him. That didn't interfere with how God blessed him. And so we get to the point now where verse 53 says, this is where we pick up in chapter 41, 53, the 7 years of plenteousness that was in the land of Egypt were ended. And so they got through the 7 years when they had been busting crops and just record production and Joseph had been wise and had gathered up out of the plenteous years plenty to see them through the 7 famine years. The 7 years of dearth began to come, verse 54, according as Joseph had said. And the dearth was in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. And the other countries didn't get this revelation from God about what was going to happen. And they didn't know, and thus they didn't prepare. They were going through 7 years of famine or 7 years of plenty in other places as well, but they were like most people, when things go very profitable and productive and plenteous, then you live that kind of a lifestyle. And then when that changes and you're left with famine, you can't make it. But that's why you have all these multi-million-dollar athletes who make gazillions of ridiculous amounts of money playing a kids game that the kids play out here at recess. And then as soon as their career's over, they go broke. They get enough money in 1 year to last a lifetime. But then as soon as they quit playing, because they elevated their lifestyle up to that and to their income. And so that's kind of what most of the other countries did. Well, we got all this plenty. We're going to live high on the, well, the Jews didn't live high on the hog, but they lived high on the cow maybe. But then, famine came. And it was everywhere. It wasn't just Egypt, and it wasn't just back in Canaan land, where Jacob and the rest of the family was. It was everywhere. In all the land of Egypt, though, there was bread, thanks to the wisdom of Joseph, who was placed there by God in the foreknowledge of God that this was what was going to happen and so forth. This is all one of those things that works together for good. We'll see it at the end. So, verse 55, when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, go unto Joseph. What he saith to you, do. All right, so there's a very obvious picture of Christ. That is almost word for word, pretty close. What Mary said when Jesus and the disciples were all invited to the wedding at Cana of Galilee in John chapter 2. And Mary told the people about Jesus, whatever he saith to you, do it. We have a gospel tract somewhere around this building, I think back here probably, called Mary's Command to Catholics. And that's what it is. Whatever Jesus says, do it. And then the tract points out, Jesus said you must be born again. And it's a pretty good tract. But anyway, it's not a coincidence. All the things that we see, you understand these are not coincidences that Joseph just so happened, and all these events just so happened to be mirrors and pictures of events and ways that Christ is and things that were said and all this kind of, that's not a coincidence. That's the supernaturalness of your Bible. John chapter 5 is, or John chapter 2 is where Mary made that statement. What he saith to you, do. Right? That's what Pharaoh said to all of the Egyptians. You go to Joseph, and whatever he says, you do it. The famine was over all the face of the earth. Joseph opened all the storehouses. That's what Malachi 3:10 said the Lord said he would do when people tithe. Sold unto the Egyptians, and the families waxed sore in the land of Egypt. In other words, it was really tough. All countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because that famine was so sore in all lands. That would connect you to the bread of life. John 6:35, that's Jesus, of course. So we got a worldwide famine. We got one country that was prepared for it because God told them it was coming. And so they had a wise man, Joseph, who prepared and made a way for all the world to be physically saved from starvation and famine. Which again, that too pictures Christ. God sent a way for the whole world to be saved in Jesus. Joseph, again, is the type of Jesus. So that brings us to chapter 42. And this is where the story picks up. It really gets interesting now. Chapter 42, when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt. Jacob's back in Canaan, remember? Him and the rest of the boys, there's 11 of them, back home. Jacob said to his sons, why do you look one upon another? Why are you standing around looking at each other? He said, behold, I've heard that there's corn in Egypt. Get you down thither and buy for us from thence what we may live and not die. In other words, you guys pack up, head down to Egypt and get us some corn so we can live instead of starving to death. And Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt, but Benjamin, Joseph's brother, that's number 11. Jacob sent not with his brethren, for he said, lest peradventure mischief befall him. In other words, he didn't want the same thing to happen to him that he thought had happened to Joseph many years before. And so 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to Egypt. In verse 6, Joseph was the governor over the land. He it was that sold to all the people of the land. He's the one that administered this program of feeding the people. And Joseph's brethren came, bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. Now, remember Joseph back in chapter 37 when he was 17 years old back home. Had 2 dreams himself. And the first one was about his brothers bowing down. And but then he had a second dream, and eventually all of his brothers, which would be 11, bowed down, plus the whole family, mom and dad, bowed down to him. So they, of course, mocked, and really their inspiration or motive in selling him or throwing him in the pit, first of all, instead of killing him and then selling him to make some money, was we'll see what happens to this dreamer's dreams. They did not like when he had his dreams about them bowing down to him and making obeisance to him. So they hated him for that. They hated him first and foremost because he was Dad's favorite, but they did not like that he was so arrogant to tell them that one day they were going to bow down to him, because they weren't going to do no such thing. Verse 7, Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them. He recognized them after all these years, this has been a long time. You remember we noted in chapter 41, he was about 30 years old, which again is the same age that Christ was, according to Luke chapter 3, when he began his public ministry. Joseph was taken out of prison and installed as the governor of the land to be in charge of this, I guess you'd call it welfare program. Though technically it wasn't welfare because people had to buy it. But he's put in charge. He's the one everybody had to come to. He's the one everybody was supposed to obey. And he was about 30 years old. He was 17 years old when this whole thing started. So it's been at least 13 years. Then he went through 7 years of plenty, so that'd make him 37. So it's been about 20 years. And we're into the famine, so it probably is a little over 22 years. So he's probably late 30s, maybe pushing 40, depending on how far into the famine it is. But it's been a long time since he saw those brethren, and a long time since they saw him. And he saw them and knew them, but the Bible says he made himself strange unto them. And again, there's another foreshadow of Christ. Jesus had a similar experience on the road to Emmaus after his resurrection, when the two guys were walking along and Jesus joined himself, and they didn't recognize him. They didn't know him, and he didn't let them. He didn't tell them who he was. He did later, as Joseph does later, but at that time, he made himself strange unto them, and he spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Whence come ye? That is, where'd you guys come from? And they said, From the land of Canaan, to buy food. And verse 8, Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew not him. As in Jesus, John chapter 1, verse 10, 11. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, but the world knew him not. He came into his own, but his own received him not. As in, he came to his Jewish brethren, and they received him not. Don't forget verse 12, though. But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name. That would be us. And verse 9, Joseph remembered the dreams, both of them, which he dreamed of them. And he said unto them, Ye are spies, to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. You just want to see how famished this nation is. So he remembered the dreams, both of them. In the second one, he had all 11 brothers bowing and mom and dad bowing as well, or the whole family. And so I don't know if he immediately came up with this plan or it just worked out that way, if you believe in that. He accused them of being spies, and they just wanted to see how weakened Egypt was because of their experience with the famine. But they said unto him, verse 10, Nay, my Lord, but to buy food are they. That's the only thing we're coming. That's the only reason we've come. We just want to buy food. You have it, and we don't. We are all one man's sons. We are true men. We are what we claim to be. We're not faking. We're not pretending. We're not spies or anything like that. We're just people from Canaan. We're all brothers from one family. And we just come to buy food, that's all. We're at the grocery store to get groceries. That's what we're here for. We're not here to rob it. We're not here to spy it out. We're not here to check out the competition. We're here to buy groceries. That's what I go to the grocery store for. We're one man's sons. We're true men. Thy servants are no spies. He said unto them, verse 12, Nay, but to see the nakedness of the land ye are coming. They said, Thy servants are 12 brethren. They included Joseph as one of them. But they don't know that they're talking to Joseph. The sons of one man in the land of Canaan, that would be Jacob. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, that would be Benjamin. He's back home with dad. And one is not. Or so they think. They say that to the one that they said is not, They're talking to him face to face and don't know it. One is not. And Joseph said unto them, verse 14, that is it that I spake unto you, saying, you're spies. Hereby ye shall be proved. In other words, I'm going to give you a chance to prove it. If you're not spies, prove it. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not go forth hence, except your youngest brother come here. This is a plot to get number 11 there. Send one of you, verse 16, let him fetch your brother, and you shall be kept in prison till he gets back with it, that your words may be proved, whether there be any truth in you. We'll find out if there really is another brother back home. Bring him down here. Or else, if you can't, or don't, or won't, surely ye are spies. And he put them all together, all 10 brothers, into ward 3 days. And after a while, Joseph said unto them the 3rd day, this do and live, for I fear God. If you be true men, let one of your brethren be bound in the house of your prison. Go ye carry corn for the famine of your houses, but bring your youngest brother unto me. So shall your words be verified, and ye shall not die. And they did so. And so, changes his mind. He decides, well, they came to get groceries, so I assume back home they need groceries, so why don't 9 of you go back home? I'm going to keep one of you here in prison. Bring that youngest brother to me. Of course, Benjamin was not only the youngest brother, it was Joseph's full brother with the same mother. Joseph and Benjamin were the only 2 of those boys born to Rachel. Remember? Bring him down and you won't die. I'll take your word that you're just true men. Verse 21, look at this. It has been over 20 years since they did what they did to Joseph, since they had last seen him in the custody of a band of Midianites that hauled him down to Egypt. Verse 21, they said one to another, we are verily guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear. Therefore is this distress come upon us. They still have a guilty conscience of what happened. Time didn't heal those wounds. Not for them. Now, it did for Joseph, but it didn't for them. And Reuben answered them, saying, spake I not unto you, saying, do not sin against a child, and you'd not hear? Therefore, behold, also his blood is required. Now we got to do this. Dad ain't going to like this one little bit. They're still living with what they did to Joseph. In verse 24, he turned himself about from them and wept, Joseph did, and returned to them again and communed with them, and took from them Simeon and bound him before their eyes. Simeon was the second oldest. Reuben was the oldest. Reuben is the one, as Reuben just said, I told you so. I told you not to do this. But the next oldest is Simeon. So Joseph keeps Simeon. So verse 25, then Joseph commanded to fill their sacks with corn and to restore every man's money into his sack, and to give them provision for the way. In other words, not just this food to take back home, but give them traveling food, something they don't have to stop at Casey's all the time, and they can just keep going. All right, give them food and provision for the way. And thus did he unto them. And this might remind you that the Lord said, come and buy food without money. Which is basically what they're getting it free. It's a gift. Their life, the bread of life, basically is, the Lord said it's free, and it is. Now, they didn't know that he put all that money, that he put their money back in their sacks until later. But they laded their asses with the corn and departed, hit the road back towards Canaan. And as one of them opened his sack to give his ass provender in, he spied his money. Behold, it was in his sack's mouth. And he said to his brother, my money is restored. Lo, it's even in my sack. And their heart failed them. They were afraid, saying one to another, what is this God hath done unto us? They came unto Jacob their father unto the land of Canaan, and told him all that befell unto them, saying, the man who is the Lord of the land, don't know yet that's Joseph, little brother Joseph. But they said, the man who's the Lord of the land spake roughly to us, took us for spies of the country. We said, no, we're true, man. We're no spies. We 12 brethren. And they told Jacob the story. One is not, the youngest is this day with the father. And the man, the Lord of the country, said unto us, hereby shall I know that you're a true man. Leave one of your brethren here with me. Take food for the famine of your households and be gone. And bring your youngest brother unto me. Then shall I know that you are no spies, but that you are true men. So will I deliver you your brother, and you shall traffic in the land. Traffic in the land is a term we still use today. We hear it used about bad things, drug trafficking and alcohol trafficking, liquor trafficking, and human trafficking. We hear about that. That's the word. And it came to pass, as they emptied their sacks, that behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when both they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. Jacob their father said unto them, me have you bereaved of my children. Joseph is not, as in dead. Simeon is not, back in prison. And you're going to take Benjamin away. All these things are against me. It sure did look that way, didn't it? But again, as with God, we know, Jacob didn't, but we know that all things work together for good to them that love God. When this was all over, or mostly over, Joseph explained it to his brothers and to his dad, that this was all God. You guys were evil, but this was all God. And after the funeral of Jacob 17 years later, he said, you guys meant it unto evil, but God meant it unto good. And God used it. What happened wasn't good, but God used it all to bring about really the deliverance and the salvation physically of Jacob and the 12 tribes of Israel. All these things are against you. That's not true. It sure did look like it. Sometimes we feel like it, but it was for his good. Verse 37, Reuben spake unto his father, saying, slay my 2 sons, if I bring him not to thee. Deliver him into my hand, and I will bring him to thee again. And he, Jacob, said, my son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is left alone. If mischief befall him by the way in which you go, then shall you bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. So that's where chapter 42 ends. That's where we'll stop. Jacob gives an adamant, no way, it's not going to happen. Benjamin is not going. I guess I will never see Simeon again either, because Benjamin is not going. We'll starve before I will send Benjamin. But chapter 43, verse 1, the famine was sore in the land, and man do just about anything when he gets hungry, and they talked him into it. So we'll pick that up, Lord willing, 2 weeks from today.